Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and I have another great show planned for us. But first, as usual, we're going to look at some artwork from my own upcoming graphic novel, Scumdogs. So just give me a moment and get this right here up. And then we'll be having some fun. Tonight, we're going to be looking at alien UFOs. Various people have seen them over the years and having some fun looking at that. Now, let's go over here. Here is my extreme 90s cover. This cover I did harken back to the comic books of the 90s. It looks pretty good. This cover is of my graphic novel Scumdogs. It has my Scumdog characters all on the cover fighting their arch enemies in the Space Forces. Now, the Scumdogs themselves, well, they're villains who want to take over the world. They're a parody of cartoons we grew up with when we were kids. And the Scumdogs themselves, well, they were former pro athletes, former pro monsters who played sports. See, in the future, there's such a thing known as the Scumdog Sports. It's basically sporting events held with superhumanly powerful monsters. They gain this power through science or some other means, and they become superhumanly powerful. They're not human, and they're called scum and dogs because they trade in their humanity for money. Because they're, they become monsters. And so think of today's athletes now, imagine them with superpowers and being monstrous things. So you get the idea they're not the nicest guys around. But what happens when they get banned from sports? Well, the Scumdogs decide to take over the world. Now on this cover, you can see my two main characters, Deathmug and Buick Starpoon. Deathmug is the purple guy with the metal mask. He's a parody of various villains from 80s cartoons. He, like Cobra Commander and Serpentor from G.I. Joe, he's got a silver mask. Like Serpentor, he's got gold on him. And he's purple like the Shredder from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And while his arch enemy Buick Starpoon is a G.I. Joe parody. He's a parody of Duke from G.I. Joe, but as well as he's a parody of Buck Rogers and Buzz Lightyear and those kinds of characters. You know, like James T. Kirk or Buck Rogers. See the uniform he's wearing? Anyone on this cover with a similar uniform to Buick Starpoon is part of his team in the Space Forces. Now, because he's a G.I. Joe parody, he has a military specialty, and his specialty is that he's a captain. Over here, this guy with the mohawk see him right there with that mohawk and stuff like that. His name is Roadhog. His military specialty is that he's an army guy. While over here, this guy with the bald guy with the gun in the blue uniform, his name is Beach Pounder. His military specialty is that he's a Marine. Just a Marine. Over here, this guy in the red uniform, firing off his weapons. His military specialty is a heavy vehicle specialist. His name is Blast Tank, otherwise he's a tanker. All right, you get the idea there. This cover is one of 3 different variant covers you'll be able to back when Indiegogo goes live, so there's that as well. Now let's look at more people in my graphic novel. Look at more other artwork from my graphic novel. Here is Girl Friday. Girl Friday is the second in command to Buick Starpoon. She's his second in command. She hates him. Well, mainly because while the Wild Rangers, that's the name of Buick Starpoon's team. That's the name of Buick Starpoon's team in the Space Forces. While the Wild Rangers go and fight the Scumdogs and save the day and save the universe, they're just highly destructive morons who destroy everything in sight. So they cut down on all the damage and all the collateral damage they're doing. Her superiors in the Space Forces assigned Girl Friday as the second in command to Buick Starpoon, and she hates her job. She thinks her career in the military is over because she's basically the second in command to an idiot, and she hates it. And she hates the rest of the Wild Rangers too. She can't stand Buick Starpoon. All right, now we're going to look at Deathmug's henchmen, because in all 80s cartoons, the main villain would have henchmen. They'd do his bidding and stuff like that, but they'd always be total idiots. Right? These are Deathmug's idiots. Well, these are Deathmug's idiots. The blue guy with the top hat. The blue guy with the top hat is Murder Mouth. The pink guy down here is Sloppy, and there are a couple of idiots. They're a parody of every henchman from an 80s cartoon. They're a couple of idiots who can't possibly do anything right, and they're funny as hell. Here we have Hair Mill Doctor. He's a parody of Dr. Mindbender from G.I. Joe, a mad scientist. But my mad scientist has been crossed over with a hair mill musician. He thinks of all the mad gadgets and machines the scumdogs use to try and take over the world, and he does it while rocking out and being awesome. Here we have Miss Brusty Melons. She's a parody of the Baroness from G.I. Joe, but unlike the Baroness, she's a party girl who wants to have fun. She only became a villain because she thought she'd have a great time. That's Miss Brusty Melons. And by the way, every time I reach a stretch goal, people have said I should make Miss Brusty Melons' breasts bigger. Maybe I'll do that. And also, I'll include the Hair Metal Doctor pinup and the Miss Brusty Melons pinup with other pinups in my graphic novel when you go back it. But also, I will also get these pinups out to you on t-shirts for you to buy from Crypto Fashion as soon as I'm able to make them, okay? Yeah, look at that. That was fun. Let's get out of this now. Look at some stuff. We can start off by looking at some Indiegogos before we look at some alien stuff. All right. Black Tiger and Dragon. Oh, it looks like there's a new Black Tiger comic book. Not bad. It's made 1,353 in 30 days left. Not too bad. We have other new comic books up. Let's take a look. Maybe. Sidong Kunim Kill Switch has ended its campaign. All right, there's that. Dreamkeepers has made $105,000. Creed Reimaginary 1-2 has made $108,000. It's still in demand. That's good. Right, not too bad. All right. Let's see, they're doing pretty well. Now, I did say we were going to have some fun. By the way, folks, hit that like button for me if you have not yet, as well as please go share this video on social media. I was going to look at, well, various UFO sightings. Let's look at the 1973 Humanoid Ufo Wave. Beginning in August 73 and lasting until December, the entire planet, the United States experienced a wave of very specific sightings. What followed would be reported after report of humanoid occupants in sight of or emerging from UFOs or humanoid creatures approaching and on occasion even giving chase to witnesses. Several cases of alien abduction were also occurred during the same period. 1973, well, 73, was a year with a much higher than normal amount of UFO sightings. The last third would prove to be even more active. Center for UFO Studies would discreetly study the wave, while they would, for the most part, withhold the witnesses' identities. The accounts make for a detailed and fascinating read. Furthermore, upon studying these figures, they would reflect very interestingly with a very similar wave sightings over France, other areas in Europe, in 54. Although the wave of UFO humanoid sightings would last for almost 5 months, the bulk of the activity was in the month of October. The 55 such sightings in the United States during the August to December period, for example, 36 occurred in October. Strangely, 7 of these sightings took place in the same day, 17th October, with 2 more having taken place in the previous evening and 3 more on the evening before that. These sightings themselves were broken down into 2 distinct categories. First, there were the humanoid sightings. These were, as the name suggests, similar to humans and would often feature communication with the witness. There were the anthropoid sightings, which were often Bigfoot-like creatures and often described as monsters by the witnesses, and there were more than those than even more UFO researchers are comfortable with. As always, many of the following accounts come from the translations of researcher Albert, okay. The quiet before the storm. While we concentrate on the latter half of 73, well, here, for obvious reasons, there was still some extremely intriguing activity that took place in the first 6 months of the year. Perhaps the most famous encountered in the 1973 wave was the Pensacola abduction, still regarded as one of the most intriguing and incredible UFO accounts on record. It might also prove that the incident was just one out of many dozens of encounters around the United States during that time. Indeed, many more when reported we can only guess at. Another incident we have examined previously is the rather bizarre bean pot UFO incident, which incidentally or not took place during the least significant UFO wave in 1967. However, in April 1973, the main witness, Reed Thompson, would experience an even more bizarre and unnerving incident. On that particular warm day, Reed was at work in the auto repair store. Two extremely strange men arrived. Each was a very disturbing appearance, each with long hair and each wearing tan jumpsuits and even heavy gloves. Furthermore, when they would speak in a mechanical, monotone voice. More concerning to Thompson was the fact that these two strangers knew all the details of the UFO he had witnessed right down to the date, and the fact he had captured a photograph of the scene. The Men in Black here we have looks pretty bad for this guy. Right down to the date, the UFO he had witnessed, right down to the date, and the fact that he had captured a photograph of the scene. It was that the strange figure. It was that the strange figure issued the demand for the photograph and the negative. Meanwhile, as this was happening, another employee craft of the auto repair shop had ventured outside to see if any other strangers were there. What he witnessed was perhaps even more bizarre than the events unfolding inside the shop. A car without steering wheel or seats. Outside was a 1969 bright yellow brick Lasar with dark glass. When he looked inside there, though the situation would take an even stranger turn, inside the strange vehicle was almost completely empty with no steering wheel or seats before he could take on any more details. However, the two strange men came outside. Kraft backed away from the car, and as he did so, his elbow touched one of theirs. As it did so, a strange feeling seemed to enter his body. Rather ominously, Kraft would pass away suddenly 2 years after the strange incident. According to the reports, 2 autopsies were performed in an attempt to establish the cause of death. Each was inconclusive. Reed would have several other encounters, both with the apparent Men in Black and with extraterrestrial entities. One in particular time, while driving to work, the strange car appeared seemingly out of nowhere, only inches from his bumper. The mysterious car continued to follow until he arrived at the auto repair shop. As he got out of the vehicle, however, a blue arc welding flash temporarily blinded him for a moment. When he refocused his visions, the ominous vehicle had completely vanished. He would report to a UFO researcher, James Todd. Big black Cadillacs or Lincolns would regularly follow him over the subsequent years. He still, though, at least according to Todd's examination of the case in the book, The Secrets of the Men in Black, still have the photograph and negative in his possession. Many significant, well-known encounters. We have also examined several other better-known incidents, 73 in depth, previously, which is perhaps an indication of how active that particular calendar actually was. Well, Another significant encounter from early 1973 would occur in Piedmont, Missouri. Several members of a high school basketball team, as well as their coaches, would witness a bizarre craft land in a field as they made their way back home from a payoff game against another high school team. In the summer of 1973, on the 7th of July in Odessa, Texas, multiple witnesses would report of a disc-shaped object hovering over a radio tower. The incident, at least according to the claims of the initial investigation, was subject to government attempts to suppress media reports of it. As October unfolded, as we will see later, incidents seemingly went into overdrive. We have looked at the Crone helicopter incidents previously, for example, which had 4 experienced military pilots as witnesses to a UFO which came into close proximity of their aircraft. While they were in the air, what's more, multiple witnesses would see events take place from below. Also in October, across the Atlantic in the United Kingdom, the case of Gabriella, who would claim to have been abducted by extraterrestrial as she drove toward the town of Longford Bedville. Perhaps one of the later instances of the year of the wave occurred in Vltavov in Belgium in December 1973. On that occasion, the witness would see a strange humanoid seemingly collecting samples of the surrounding vegetation. As we will see, these are but a sample and tiny one of the incidents that would take place. A year full of discrete random encounters. There were, of course, sightings all over the planet during 1973. For example, in April 1973, over our primary school in Everperk, Malaysia, a flying saucer would land in the middle of the playground. At least according to the account of the Encyclopedia of Alien Encounters, a summary of UFO and related events. Well, a summary of UFO and related. This is very strange. This sounds like that. There sounds like the UFO encounter that happened to a bunch of people in Africa during the 90s or so. The so-called something. It was something that happened in Africa at an elementary school that a bunch of children saw alien saucer and a strange alien being that got out of it, who would basically, the kids would play with the alien, well, from a distance at least. They'd do stuff and the alien would mimic what they were doing. And the alien basically gave them a message that Earth was basically heading towards a disaster and they needed to do something about it. This sounds very much like that. Related events in Malaysia. Related events, huh? Even more bizarre, several tiny humanoids in sunny white suits would venture out of the strange and miniature craft. However, when one of the teachers approached, the small creatures went back to the apparent spaceship, which they took off and took off and vanished. Yeah, this sounds exactly like that incident, doesn't it? Further to that, a very similar incident had taken place in the rice fields of Rentu, Pajang, the previous year. On that occasion, while playing in the fields, a young girl would witness a miniature man who was walking through the field. He was dressed all in white and sporting long white hair. She would make an attempt to catch him. However, he would disappear into the hole in the ground, and the local boy also reported chasing a very similar-looking small man, well, at the same time. While it is easy to discuss such accounts as the fruitful and overactive minds of the young, every single one of us familiar with folklore tales of fairies, little people, all manner of other supernatural beings, might these be based on encounters from antiquity, miniature extraterrestrials, or with real fairies? Or might these be tiny entities, not be alien at all, but something different altogether, although certainly no less mind-blowing? Although there is very little information on the actual sighting itself, an intriguing picture taken over Bali Island, Indonesia, around the same time as the above encounter, very much worth checking out, which you can do below. Encounters of South American border. Across the southern border, UFO sightings were also in the increase, and what's more, they were similarly so formed the beginning of the year. Perhaps one of the first incidents in the 1973 UFO wave, as far as Mexican authorities were concerned, occurred in late March, according to the report in the LC. And a report in the newspaper, multiple people witnessed a luminous object in the skies over San Pedro. What's more, the object was moving by an extraordinary rate of speed. When we examined a translation of the account by Scott Corrales, just by Scott, it notes how regular commercial flights did not fly over this community, meaning that a mistaken sighting of a terrestrial vehicle is unlikely. Certainly at the speeds in the report. Furthermore, the witnesses were largely from farming communities with little interest or engagement in the modern world, meaning it is unlikely they would have the inclination or interest in manufacturing such an event for financial gain or notoriety. Of course, the incident above is far from the only one to be in the Mexican UFO records throughout 1973. In fact, while the San Pedro incident was by large the first widely reported sighting of 1973, there were several others in the country that occurred even earlier. Persistent sightings of glowing luminous objects. A week or so before the account over San Pedro, an encounter featuring the occupants of a strange craft would surface, according to the to the newspaper. On the evening of 14th March, Brother Juan and Ruben would witness a glowing round object overhead as they worked at the La Prita mine. Furthermore, the glowing light would approach the two men, causing them to flee the area and alert other employees as well as their superiors when they came to witness the bizarre events. Each could see the strange object hanging motionless for several moments before they finally rising into the air and disappearing out of their sight. At such great speed, they would be described as incalculable. Perhaps even more intriguing, Rubin would state in the press that the mysterious object had vanished into the area known as the Zone of Silence, which has a long history of strange sightings and goings on to its name. Hmm. Very, very weird. Whew. By the way, folks, hit that like button for me if you have not yet. Please do so. It helps me fight the algorithm, as well as please hit that bell, as well as please hit the part that gives you all notifications for my future content, as well as please go share this video on Twitter and Facebook. But very strange, huh? All these people and stuff like that. It's amazing all this stuff happened and people still don't believe in aliens, or at least maybe something is out there. Not maybe it's not aliens, maybe it's something we don't understand, something that, like ultra terrestrials. Maybe they're magical. But it's definitely very strange. The fact that another strange thing is they look like creatures from a 50s sci-fi film as well, what they've been describing here. And that's another strange thing. Why does it look like that as well? Or they could very well be something like ultra terrestrials. Perhaps even more intriguing, Rubin would state to the press that the mysterious object had vanished into the area known as the Zone of Silence, which has a long history of strange sightings. Several weeks earlier, in mid-February, another motorist on the Mexican highways experienced a similar luminous object, this time a sales agent, Alfonso, would claim that a ball of light had overtaken his vehicle while he was traveling from Uruapan to Paracho. He would recall how the object had at first appeared as one of those stars that appear to move every so often. However, it soon became increasingly bigger as it approached his vehicle with increasing speed. As it remained over the car, a blue light washed over the surrounding area, seemingly from the craft's underside, as well as causing influence from the car's radio. It would stay overhead for several minutes before stumbling, moving away, and disappearing into the sky. Bizarre encounter. Although it occurred several months later, well into the 1973 wave, another incident from Mexico, this time in Pablo, September, is a very much worth including here. And what's more, the apparent close encounter occurred in the same area. There was a mass UFO sighting took place in July. On the morning of 23rd September, 23rd, two shepherds would hear two loud detonations before witnessing a bizarre glowing craft crossing the sky and disappearing into a nearby gorge. Almost as soon as it disappeared, a noise that made the earth shake rang out. As the two shepherds went to investigate, a local man, Alfonso, who would report details on the account to the newspaper, would follow them. When they entered the area, two living beings covered with fur similar to straw appeared. Right, there's that as well. Are these Bigfoot? It isn't clear what happened after that, but Hernandez would lead members of the newspaper to the site the following day, although the shepherds were no longer there to speak with, and there was no sign of the two strange entities. There was an apparent display of carnage in the shape of overturned and avalanche rocks, as well as uprooted trees. Hernandez would state that damage was not there the previous day, and when it was, in his opinion, the result of the strange craft entering the area. Did it crash, or might it have activated some kind of a technological device to open a portal and disappear, leaving behind this damage discovered by and shortly after? Discovered by those and shortly after. The bizarre creature in the bridge of the Isle on an island. According to a report in the Journal, Volume 6, Number 5, an incident over the Isle of Wight would take place during the late afternoon of 15th May. And what's more, many of the details make it for an almost carbon copy of multiple other sightings of 1973. In the town of Sundown, 7-year-old Faye was playing on the golf links with a friend when a sudden siren-like sound rang out, startling both of them. They looked around and track down where the noise was coming from. They would make their way to a hedge that they pushed their way through. As they did so, a swampy meadow awaited them. At the same time, the ear-piercing noise ceased. They ventured into the swampy environment. As they made their way along a footbridge, a strange figure became visible underneath. The two children watched in shock as the strange creature, approximately 7 feet tall, moved with a strange hopping motion with knees raised high. It would make its way to a metallic hut with no windows. The creature seemingly wore a strange hat as well as a tight fitting tunic. Furthermore, its face, a strange deathly white, had triangular markings for eyes, as well as a brown square for a nose and motionless lips. After having entered the craft, the creature suddenly emerged again, and in its three-fingered hand was a strange box like a microphone. He turned it to the children, waved, and spoke into the box, asking the children if they were still there. You know who I am? What is interesting about this later development is the notion that the box is some kind of translation device, and what's more, this appears in numerous close encounter accounts of the same era, or even further interest. Such devices exist in our modern world today. The already bizarre encounter would take an even stranger twist as the creature began a dialogue with the children, who in turn asked several questions of their own, one of which was whether he was a man, to which the creature replied no. In response, the children asked if he was a ghost. To this, the creature would reply that he wasn't, but I am in an odd sort of way. When the children persisted in what he was, if not a man or a ghost, the creature simply replied, you know. Then, having assured them that the creature was indeed friendly, the two children followed the figure into the metallic hut. It had 2 floors inside, with the lower floor contained lots of dials and with wooden furniture. The upper floor, meanwhile, had a metal floor and had a much less space to move. Perhaps even more intriguing, the creature would state that he lived on berries that he would pick for them, or he would collect the river water, and then, after cleaning it, the children would claim to speak with the strange creature for around 30 minutes before they left and ran back to the crossfield. Once home, they were eager to tell of the strange man that they had met earlier. Needless to say, that story was not taken seriously. Strange activity in Australia. Continuation of the wave. Before we move on to examine some of the incidents that would rock the United States towards the end of 73, 2 incidents took place in Australia, which would unfold in the opening weeks of the year, are very much worth including here, not least because the details of the accounts are similar to other incidences in the same period of time. Each of the cases comes to us from the UFO files of UFO researcher Bill Chalker. In the opening days of the year, Elizabeth C. and several friends would witness a strange light that appeared to follow their vehicle as they made their way to a campsite in Sunland's Head. What's more, while that light would disappear, they would later witness a bizarre event involving the military off the coast from the upper campsite, an event that the military would deny taking place. Incidentally, you can read about this particular encounter in full in a UFO Insight book from deep within the archives of U.F.O. Insight. Several months later, in the early evening, 25th, at around 7 p.m., an entire family in the Dortons would witness a large disc hovering overhead for around 15 minutes before disappearing to the evening sky. During the duration of the sighting, a green glow would develop in the object. Furthermore, around the middle of a bright red light rotated. The incident would unfold in a remote part of the country in the areas of Emmondale and Crefton, and Chatham and Dunbarabin. Furthermore, it appeared the incident would involve the Durham family. It was one of many that occurred in the area at the time. This 1973 humanoid, this is basically what to the article, humanoids now. Before we move on to the latter half of 1973, there are several incidents to examine from early in the year in the United States. One of these is documented in the book, The UFO Evidence, a 30-year report, Volume 2, by Richard Hall, occurring during a flight from St. Louis to Dallas over Oklahoma. It was a little after 2:30 a.m. While at the altitude of 5,000 feet, the crew would notice what looked like another aircraft approaching them. As the pilot and co-pilot continued to watch the object, would it suddenly shoot up toward their position. Once level with the plane's altitude, it would make a sharp turn and then head straight toward them. It would stop at a distance of around 300 yards. Following its sudden stop, the crew members took in as much detail of the craft as they could. The object was definitely disc-shaped, with a transparent dome on top. Its exterior was distinct silver with a highly polished finish. Making the incident even more incredible was the fact that the captain would use the plane's weather radar system to confirm that something solid was definitely in front of them, and that they were not experiencing some kind of bizarre hallucination. Even more bizarre, the object could seemingly sense the beam of radar and would move to the side of the plane as soon as the beam hit the strange craft's surface. After another moment, it would then drop around 300 feet below their position. As the crew members looked below and into the transparent dome, they could see 2 of 3 shadowy entities. Inside, once more, they appeared to be moving the object, then vanished out of sight at lightning speed. The encounter of Cecil, He must a guy who saw it. Although it would unfold several months before the increase in sighting at the end of the summer of 1973. Let me go. This is pretty interesting, huh? An incident of the 4th of July in West Springfield, Massachusetts, and another particular interest to us here. The incident was part of a MUFON investigation conducted by Bruce Tilden. On the night in question. Let me go back over here to see if they have any. Oh, Bob Rogers, Little Miss Sunshine. Project Bluebeam. Does sound like it, doesn't it? But this was the 1973 UFO wave and stuff that happened. That people have apparently experienced and stuff. As the crew, on the night in question, around 8:30 p.m., main witness Cecil, who was approximately in her early 70s, was sitting on her patio smoking a cigarette. As she did so, she would witness a large disc-shaped object descend from the treetops around her property. At first, the bizarre object would land in a nearby field before rising once again just as high enough to clear the surrounding trees. All the while, the witness did not hear a single sound come from the strange craft. She would, though, whether just for the bizarreness of the situation or for some other reason, suggestive of a technological device in the craft, was mesmerized by its presence. By the time she had come out of the trance-like state and realized what exactly she was witnessing, she rushed inside to inform her husband, who was showering. By the time each of them arrived back on the patio, the object had vanished from sight. Investigators of the incident would suggest that the witness is more than credible for a number of reasons. Firstly, she was insistent on no publicity or public appearances, and obviously that she remains anonymous. Furthermore, though retired at the time of the sighting, she was a college graduate from a professional-type career behind her. Furthermore, in an attempt to rationalize the incident in her mind, although fully realizing it was an extraordinary encounter, she would look to find an explanation in spiritual and religious circles, at least initially. Late summer sightings, August-September 1973. The first sightings on record occurred during the late afternoon, 9th August, in Exeter, New Hampshire. As they were driving along one of the main highways, a father and his son witnessed a landed UFO in a field at the side of the road. Furthermore, they could both clearly see a humanoid figure standing outside it. A month later, 9th September, came a report of another landing in Laurel Grove in Savannah, Georgia. Several local teenagers witnessed the landing. They would state witnessing a door open on the craft before 10 big black hairy dogs came out and ran into the night. The UFO, which was glowing brightly. Black hairy dogs. 10 big black hairy dogs. Came out. Yeah. That is another thing. More black hairy dogs. Could they be shapeshifters or some other thing? Could they be friends with Bigfoots? We've heard about these big black hairy dogs before, these hellhounds that have been talked about. Are these actually aliens, or are we talking about something supernatural here? Because this is definitely something to be thinking about here. What could it possibly be? What's with the big dogs here? Big black dogs. Why do these keep coming up along with Bigfoot as well? The UFO, which was, they ran into the night, glowing brightly, then dulled somewhat as if someone had turned out the light. Just over a week later, on the 18th, a young married couple would experience a loud thud outside their home in Durham, New Hampshire. It was a little after 9:30 p.m. and dark outside. The young man walked around the property and stopped in his tracks. By the way, folks, hit that like button for me, will you? As well as hit that bell, as well as please hit the part where you get notifications for all my future videos, as well as please share this video on social media. Share it anywhere on social media. And let's get back to this. The young man walked around the property and stopped in his tracks when he saw 3 small circular glowing spots, greenish in her, on the ground. The sound of electrical noise filled the air. The source seemed to be from above him. He could also hear garbled voices, but again, he could locate where they came from. The couple would go to bed for the evening at 11:30 p.m. The glowing circles were still present at the garden. Oh, wow. What is this? What are people seeing here? This all seems like something that you'd see in a science fiction movie, but is it? Are the aliens or whatever these creatures are just basically playing to people's fears and expectations? Because this because you can see it in several different ways that this guy did experience something alien, but it could also be that maybe these ultra-terrestrials, if that's what they are, these creatures that are not human but from Earth, are playing up on people's expectations of them and basically making people think they're aliens. The couple would go to bed for, 2 nights later at Sydney, North Carolina, a week of reports from several people began. Several witnesses, some entire families would report, North Carolina, would report a monster with large red glowing eyes. Perhaps bizarrely, this creature was otherwise dressed in human clothes, a brown shirt, black trousers. Sir, sounds like the Mothman, and a brown cap. It appeared to use a medallion-type item on its chest for communication and could leap 50, 60 feet. And it also sounds like Spring-Heeled Jack into the air, somewhere between Columbus and Mansfield sighting. Although the exact date is not sure, the sighting along Interstate 71 in Ohio between Columbus and Mansfield is thought to have taken place in late September. It was well after midnight when the witness noticed a flashing light behind his car. First it was to his right, then to his left. It finally appeared in front of him, and it then sped off into the night ahead of him. He was driving at around 70 miles per hour. He believed he must have lost consciousness for some reason. The next thing the witness could remember was waking up behind the wheel of the moving vehicle as it moved at nearly 90 miles per hour. When the man finally arrived at his Cleveland home, he realized he could not account for nearly an hour of time. Although he would attempt to put the episode out of his mind, he would begin to experience bizarre psychic episodes and would ultimately seek hypnotic regression. He would recall shortly after seeing the strange lights around I-71. I-71, he had no idea even at the time why he was doing this. He was driving along a lonely, narrow, tree-lined road. It was then he could see three entities on the road. He was in a tree-lined road, otherwise in the forest. I'm bringing up ultra-terrestrials again because a lot of these encounters with these guys happen in the woods, just like Bigfoot, or something similar to that, out in the country. So, did this guy actually experience aliens? Did they kidnap him? And it did move forward in time. Was he actually abducted, or is the fact that he can't explain why he was an hour late to his home, even though it should only taken him an hour earlier or an hour and a half earlier than what should have taken? Did they not take him? Maybe they somehow sent forward in time, or is the fact that he was around these entities caused time to go faster? We don't know. One was stood in front while the other two were beside the car. We're talking about the entities he met. They appeared to be floating. Suddenly, a craft was approaching them from above. Before he could react, he was rising towards the craft. Terror filled his mind. He was placed on a table. The strange entities were around him. He could make out a metallic look to the clothing. One of the creatures was examining his legs, while another had an instrument nearer to his head. Suddenly his vision was filled with bright light. Then he was back in his car, and the craft moving upwards. Monsters. All right. On 1st of October in Anthony Hill, Tennessee, during a thunderstorm, 3 teenagers would report a huge, hairy, robot-like creature in the woodlands of the area. It raised its arms and had a round head. It would seem wise to dismiss this account. However, several corresponding statements of seeing a UFO over the area. The youngsters claimed that the sightings occurred would suggest otherwise, as would the strange imprints found in the area. Around 10 days later in Alabama, a 3-year-old boy would come into his mother after playing outside. He would matter-of-factly inform her that he had been playing with an old monster with gray. Oh, that's interesting as well. By the way, folks, have you hit that like button for me? Let's go over here. Let's see. Ooh, not doing too bad with those likes. Thank you. If you have not hit that like button for me yet, please hit that like button. With an old monster with gray and that was gray and stuff, huh? On the 4th of October in California, came a sighting of a triangular object in a dust cloud on the side of the road. The witness was driving along the semi-freeway when he spotted the object. It hovered around 10 feet from the ground. On top of the craft was a clear blue bubble shape that seemed to be swirling around. On the underside of a rope of some sort looked to be hanging from an unseen opening. A humanoid appeared from out of the craft on the top side. It would look at the witness for a moment before scrambling out of sight. The humanoid was a similar size to a human adult. It seemed to be dressed in some kind of wetsuit with silver in color. A whirring noise suddenly broke out. Was an otherwise silent atmosphere. The bubble on top of the craft began to turn a little faster as it did so. Out of nowhere, a fog appeared and enveloped the object. By the time the fog cleared, the craft was gone. The mid-October surge, shortly after midnight on 15th October in Omero, Wisconsin, the witness awoke to find their room glowing. The witness awoke to find their room glowing orange and a high-pitched whirring filling their ears. A whirring sound filling their ears. Whirring filling their ears. Suddenly, 3 humanoid creatures appeared out of nowhere in the bedroom. They were around 5 feet tall with wrinkled gray skin and bald heads. He must have passed out, as the next thing he knew, he was sat against the wall with the creatures in front of him. They seemed to be examining him. One of them had an oval object that it would pass over this body. He caught a sight of it as it passed over his legs. To his astonishment, he could see his bones through the object. He must have been some highly advanced real-time X-ray device. Just as the creatures reached towards his head, he passed out again. He would awake near dawn. The witness would keep the incident to himself for some time. However, following a similar encounter happening to his girlfriend, he would come forward with a report with a report. On the same evening in Burra, Tennessee, on the same evening, the Klein family would awaken to find the sound of their dogs barking frantically. Looking outside, they could clearly see the bright lights of a UFO in the woods nearby. The following morning, the family would find claw-like tracks as well as landing marks over the area they had seen the lights. On the same evening, in Interstate 90 near Gulfport, Missouri, a taxi driver would witness an oblong UFO with blue light pass overhead. It would land somewhere in the front of his vehicle, which at the same time stalled, as well as the electrics going dead. He sat still in his vehicle. Suddenly, a claw-like hand tapped on the window as something rushed past. A ghost-like figure in abductions. In Albany, Ohio, still on the 16th of October, after arriving home for the evening, the witness would see a ghost-like figure in the distance floating around 50 feet from the ground. Judging by the surroundings, the creature would have no more than 4 feet tall and was extremely thin. It also appeared to have very tight-fitting clothing, as if they had been draped in a close-fitting sheet. She stood and watched the strange creature for several moments before noticing a bright light moving towards it. When it got to around 200 feet, the creature appeared to vanish. Other signs of strange lights were reportedly locally in nearby Athens same day or same night. At roughly the same time in Burbank, California, 2 young children report a UFO landing in their backyard. It had, according to the 4-year-old, a pointed top, rays of light coming from underneath. 4 occupants invited the boy to look inside the ship before he had the chance to. However, the craft vanished. Short seconds later, the boy's father approached from inside to investigate why the family dog was barking so excitedly. In Lowell, Utah, as the evening of the 16th of October morphed into the early hours of the 17th, a woman along with her 3 children and the son of their neighbor were all abducted from the family home and taken aboard a craft. All were subject to intense medical examinations by strange humanoid creatures. The main witness could remember being in a big room with lots of lights and buttons, as well as glass tubes containing liquid. She could see 4 or 5 humanoid creatures, and at least 2 humans. The humanoids had large heads and 2 or 3 big claws. These would open like a clasp. The explosive day of October 1973. Several hours later, in Parksville, Maryland, a woman was brought from sleep by the sound of an explosion. As she stepped outside of her property and onto the porch, she could see an oblong-shaped object in front of her. It was red but transparent. On top of the side of the craft was a strange bubble. Even more bizarre, the witness witness inside the bubble was a human figure who appeared to be standing. On their way out of New Jersey to New York City, two men driving along Route 23 would report seeing a large brown silver craft hovering over a field that ran along the roadside. They continued to watch the craft. Amazed to see it begin to descend, they brought their car to a stop and stepped out of the vehicle. In time to see the UFO land, several humanoids emerged from the craft. And while the driver entered the car and sped off in panic, the second gentleman claimed to have spoken to the occupants. It perhaps should be noted that while this particular sighting appears very likely, that direction was highlighted as questionable by investigators. A sighting in Watauga, Tennessee, a little later almost turned into an abduction, according to the witness. A copper-colored circular UFO would hover only a foot or two from the ground. In an open doorway, a humanoid creature, roughly around 6 feet tall, reached out of the craft and tried to grab two children. Witnesses claimed the creature had claw-like hands. There were at least 6 other UFO reports in the region the same day. A robot-like creature. A bizarre chase account would very likely have been dismissed if it hadn't come via Police Chief Jeff Grinshaw. He would also manage to capture a photograph of a humanoid in a silvery suit. Grinshaw had ventured out into an area in Foxville, Alabama, to investigate reports of UFO sightings there. When he spotted the metallic-looking creature, he pulled the car over to the side of the road. The creature moved towards the vehicle at first, but then turned and ran in the opposite direction. Grinshaw gave chase for several moments, but the creature sped up considerably. He would lose sight of it when this car came off the road temporarily. Sighting in Alabama, September 17th, October, came from Luxley pickup driver Clarence Patterson, who was moving along the highway when a car-shaped UFO cast a luminous green light over the vehicle. The next thing Patterson was aware of, the truck was rising off the road and was pulled into the craft overhead. At least 6 robot-like beings would drag him from the truck's cabin. Bizarrely, he was certain these robots could read his thoughts. It was then he blacked out. The next thing he knew, he awoke in the driver's seat of the moving truck. He was traveling around 90 miles per hour with no idea how long he had been conscious. One interesting detail given by Patterson was the sight of sulfur that remained with him. He smelled sulfur. Long after the incident, many witnesses to UFO sightings and specifically alien abductions often mention a strong aroma of sulfur during their encounters. Sightings continue across the country. Across. A little while later, just outside of Dinsville, Georgia, Paul Brown make an emergency stop after an oval-shaped craft landed in the middle of the road around 300 feet in front of him. The two 4-foot creatures emerged from the underside of the craft. They looked around momentarily before scrambling back into their oval objects. Upon seeing Brown with an audible whoosh, the craft ascended at breakneck speed. As evening approached in Europe, Missouri, drivers witnessed a UFO 50-foot wide hovering over Highway 82. The main witness was watching the craft when he realized the vehicle simply cut out of another car. Another car similarly experienced similar difficulties as it slowed behind his. Above this first craft, a second craft hovered. A beam of light appeared to connect the two huge discs. As the witness looked on, that creature appeared and descended from the top craft to the bottom one. Both crafts disappeared shortly after. The following day, 2 teenagers were chased by a white thing in Trenton, Virginia, while on White Oak Mountain. The creature was around 4 feet tall with a large head and a shimmering body. Although there was little to no other reports of the strange creature, several reports of UFOs are on record in the area that day. This day after the 19th of October, a woman would pull her car over to the roadside in Interstate 73 in her husband, Georgia. It had seemingly stalled, but for no apparent reason. Out of nowhere, a strange metallic man with bubble-like dome on his head appeared. It moved like a robot and had a shiny appearance. Although the same arms were narrow and wrinkled, it would walk around the vehicle before vanishing into thin air. The silver-suited creatures of Indiana. Although the sightings would begin to slow and somewhat following the peak of 16th, 17th October, many reports would would arrive with Crufus on 22nd October in Hartfield City, Indiana. For example, 3 separate sightings of 4-foot humanoids in silver suits were reported. One report from Debbie Kent, who saw from Crescent Road, would upon seeing her, one of them raised their arms as if in an attempt to scare her. Around 15 minutes later, the Dothan family would witness 2 bright silver humanoids. Each had no defining features other than the bizarrely boxed feet. As their car approached from behind, it was obvious the creatures were trying to get off the main road. They eventually did so, and the following day, and prints were discovered in the location of Darthlands said the encounter took place. Gray Filter was a local investigator and was working at the above Darthland case when he had his own experience 2 hours later. As he was surveying the area, he suddenly noticed a line of small mammals in the distance. It was then that he also noticed an uncomfortable high-pitched sound. He would shine his truck headlights in the direction of the sound and could clearly see 2 creatures described by the Darthlands. They would turn to face him, forcing him to dim his headlights. Such was the glare bouncing from their shiny suits. Although it appeared to be wearing gas-like masks and their box feet appeared to be artificial, as if they were adorned some kind of spacesuit. As he watched them, they had bent their knees slightly, and the 2 went and then with a jumping motion flew off like a helicopter. The New Hemisphere sightings. The last cluster of 73 humanoid sightings occurred in early November, Crestfield, New Hampshire. The first saw the witness, Florence Dow, hear a sudden thump in the middle front of her property one evening. She went to the front of the house and saw a motionless figure in an old black coat. The bizarre creature remained there for several minutes before disappearing. All right. While driving home late one evening, Linda Morrill witnessed a yellow-orange globe in the front of her vehicle. The craft had a honeycomb design. Aside from one large oval window, she stared intently at this window, amazed that she could see a humanoid figure inside the craft. It appeared to be gray, wrinkled skin with a light-colored... wow, this is very weird as well. Gray wrinkled skin with a lighter colored head to its body, though it may have had a suit on, so you could only clearly see that the eyes were larger than they should be for the size of its head. Lydia wasn't sure if the creature could see her, but she could hardly help the feeling of being drawn to the craft. She managed to tear herself from its influence and found refuge in a nearby house. It isn't clear if Lydia experienced any missing time at the time of the report. She didn't wish to pursue regression therapy to find out. Let's see, any more like buttons? If you haven't hit that like button from yet, folks, please do so. It helps me fight the algorithm. All right. Rick Snow and his wife would awaken late one night to the sound of activity outside their house. Upon inspection, by the way, folks, hit that like button, as well as hit that bell for me, as well as hit the part that will get you all future notifications from my channel, as well as please go share this video on Twitter and Facebook. Let's see, 52 minutes in, not bad. The wife would awaken late one night to the sound of activity outside their house. Upon inspection, Rooks could see 2 humanoids who were self-luminous and adorned in a tight silver suit. They were around 4 feet tall. They appeared to be examining the ground around them as if they were collecting specimens. The family guard dog would approach them as about to attack. Specimens. The family guard dog would approach them as if about to attack, but would stop suddenly in its tracks. He would then turn around and head back to the family home. They overlooked UFO Wave. Taking place at the same time, running at the summer of 74, was a discreet but very active wave of UFO sightings over Spain. To a declassified document, several of these sightings were rife with detail and much more than merely random lights in the sky. For example, 23rd, 1974, near, Castile de las Guards, an aluminum mothership, as well as 3 smaller ships, resembling mushrooms, trailing were witnessed by a motorist traveling toward the village. The objects made no sound whatsoever as they moved across the sky. Furthermore, they had a solid exterior with no window. Perhaps more of concern was that one of the smaller craft would follow his vehicle for several miles before joining the others. Let's see. On the same day, just outside of Sinclair, let me do this first. On the same day, just outside, the chauffeur of President Carter's provincial commission witnessed a metallic luminous object moving through the sky with a brightness. As his car came closer to the object, his car would eventually fail and come to a stop. When the object moved away, the engine kicked back in again. 3 days later, at 26, much to the town of Vajeros, the report of a luminous glowing round object surfaced. The witness, a truck driver, would notice the object hovering over the road in front of him. He further noticed a similar object much closer to him. As he watched the extraordinary events from the cab of his truck, 2 strange entities emerged from the object furthest from him. They immediately noticed his presence, and after pointing at him, would re-enter the craft. A moment later, both of the strange objects rose into the sky and disappeared. However, the following day, the incident would take a quick twist. Witnesses like that. On the 27th, much of the same truck driver, all driving the same region but at a different point in the highway, would witness 3 silver ships parked on the road. Furthermore, a light similar to a floodlight came from each of one. As the witness approached the bizarre scene, he killed the engine of his vehicle and stepped outside. However, a moment later, several strange beings approached the car. Their presence caused him to panic, and he turned to run immediately. He would eventually drive into a gutter and attempt to evade the strange creatures, who were now in pursuit. They would ultimately pass by his hiding place, coming to within mere feet of his location. Although he could see their faces from his position, he didn't recall that they had he did recall that they had 2 arms and legs, but were just under 7 feet tall. They would ultimately return to their ship and lived into the night sky above. During an investigation of the scene the following day, a strange hole was discovered in the ground where the truck driver claimed to have witnessed the craft's moving. What perhaps is interesting about the case is the claims that the witness that he couldn't see the creatures' faces. Well, certainly not something to hang out hat on the investigation, or on one would suspect that he had the claims been false. He would have manufactured such information on the same day, but in malaria and a day in another area. A photographer, by the way, folks, hit that like button for me, as well as go share this video on social media, would witness a big luminous object overhead. He would quickly snap a picture of the craft. Upon developing, 2 other objects that he hadn't noticed at the same time were also visible. More signs of a Spain glowing craft and other things as well. On the 14th, 1974, came another sighting in the town of Heron. Of a glowing luminous object was reported by a professor, his wife, and student. According to the report, the student would hear a prolonged noise which reminded them of an alarm clock. By the time they had noticed the glowing object descending, the professor and his wife arrived to witness the events. The strange object then moved along the surface of the glowing for several moments before disappearing into the distance. Several weeks later, at a little after 5 p.m. on the 16th June in Cuscus, yet another luminous craft sighting. The witness would see the fascinating events as he traveled to work. Suddenly, he could see a brilliant light as he traveled along the road. He suddenly realized that the craft was following his car, which made him increase his speed significantly. He did, though, manage to grab a look at the craft, and specifically its interior, where he could see the 3 tall figures. How much more of this do I have left? Okay. Ultimately, the witness would make the decision to switch off the lights of his car. Remarkably, as soon as he did so, the object would move away from him and give up the chase. He would then switch back on. Likewise, the action prompted the craft to approach his vehicle. Once more, it would remain behind him until he pulled the car to a stop. Once lights were off, the strange pursuing craft would lose interest and move into the night. It moved off in the night. This is indeed an interesting detail, and is surely a consequence of importance. Why intelligent entities at the controls would the mere act of switching off the lights result in a craft moving away? Surely not just hysteria. The sightings became much more sporadic following the New Hampshire episode, although they would continue until mid-December. Just what these sightings were, and if there was a connection between them, is very much the question. It is unlikely to be a case of hysteria or mass suggestion. While the public was aware the UFO sightings were increasing, it was hardly covered in a serious manner in the media. Most that heard such stories assumed the witnesses had sunk one too many beers or smoked too strong a joint. Furthermore, such organizations would conduct themselves with discretion, and further still, in 1973 was long before the age of the internet. Incidents could occur in different states, even different towns, unless they attracted the national news. Nobody outside the area would be aware. It is interesting that there were several claims with creatures with claw-like hands. This is interesting that in such a bizarre detail, it screams authenticity. What's more, although there are claims of such claws in other accounts, it seems particularly prevalent in 1973. And, well, it happened. It seems, prevalent in 1973, huh? In short, it would appear that something was roaming around the United States at the last third of the year. Perhaps it was visitors from another world or a fact-finding mission, or perhaps these visitors were the result of some kind of naturally occurring portal or gateway. Maybe this is the reason why the cluster of sightings in mid to late October. Perhaps that is why a similar wave occurred in 1954, with the peak of the wave occurring in October of that year. Or maybe the sightings have a connection to a secret military experiment. Only by examining other waves and accounts will we eventually find out just what all of these people saw in the fall of that year. Why the very unique 1973 UFO wave not better remembered? Why isn't this better thought of, huh? Like many of the UFO waves from history, the 1973 one has its very own unique details, perhaps not least the number of humanoid encounters. Perhaps we should also note the similarities aside from the obvious ones of the 7-foot humanoid occupants. What about the precision description of luminous craft landing on otherwise quiet roadways? This not only suggests this same type of craft, but also some kind of operating procedure. Despite the wealth of accounts and extremely memorable ones, at that, the wave of 1973 is largely not remembered outside the UFO community, and even then it appears to pale in comparison to waves of the previous decades. Why might this be, if indeed it is a detail of consequence? Might it be, for example, due to the fact that the Watergate scandal was rolling around at full steam at the same time as many of the sightings? Or might such reports of suppression and media reports of the incident have been more successful than we might think? Perhaps underlying this point is, why did this particular wave, at least in its sheer unity, cease to so suddenly? What mission experimented was seemingly finished and deemed complete that caused the humanoid waves to stop? And as we have asked in other stories, were these events for the benefit of humanity, or will they prove to be ultimately very much to our collective derailment? Only further study and comparison with other waves and events will ultimately shed light on these questions. Check out the video. Looks pretty good to me. What could it have been? What did these people all see? Xavier Morgan, why are UFOs being declassified? Well, probably because they know that they can't do anything to stop them. They don't even know what they are. They could be some natural phenomenon or something else, or they could actually be some controlled by intelligent beings who could be from outer space, or maybe from or ultra-terrestrial. Some info coming, huh? Xavier Morgan, some more info, huh? Yeah, it could be. Xavier Morgan, possibly even more advanced humans that have always lived amongst us, possibly as well. Possibly. And I'm going to thank you all for joining me. Tonight has been a pretty good live stream, folks. I'm going to thank you all for joining me. Hit that like button. That's pretty good. Remember, please subscribe to my YouTube. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics, they're bad for you. There is misspelled. Hit that like button. Make sure you're still subscribed. Hit that like button. Hit that bell and make sure to hit the part that will give you notifications for all my future videos, as well as please leave some comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys, as well as share this video out on social media. Share this video out on social media. Share it out on Twitter and Facebook, as well as please go over to rumble.com and subscribe to my Rumble channel. The name of my channel is on Rumble is Comic Freak, as well as go over to BitChute and subscribe to my BitChute channel. It is also named Comic Freak. Let's see. Also, please go over to Stitch Together Picks. Stitch Together Picks is a YouTube channel. Yeah, Stitch Together Picks is a YouTube channel that deserves far more subscribers. It's got a great host, and you're going to love his reviews of movies, as well as go over to Creepy Little Book and subscribe to him too. Creepy Little Book is like the Art Bell radio show. He does small videos talking about high strangeness, but he also live streams every night. On weekdays, he live streams at 12:30 a.m. and weekends at 10 o'clock p.m. He talks about aliens and ghosts, and you learn he does some great live stream. He does some great live streams. So go and subscribe to Creepy Little Book, as well as go and subscribe, as well as please come back tomorrow for my next live stream. I'll do it around 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, 8 or 10 for another live stream. So be sure to come back again then. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me.